Listening to voices, stories can be strange. It's good to open up to new stories and finding backstories of how people came to be, only to free the mind of what blinds us with only a glance gives us a chance to see people be who they truly are, from silent voices to shining light. Stories that inspire awareness and change. I welcome you to Jessi Stories, Unheard Voices.
All right. Welcome, Makena, to Jessi Stories, Unheard Voices. If you can describe what you do and who you are.
Yes, definitely. Hi, everyone. I'm Makena. I am a writer and songwriter for the Page Screen and Stage. I am also an editor and a teacher. And so that means I write a lot of different stuff. And my day job is in publishing, and I like to teach, and I'm hoping to manifest more teaching work this year. So I do a lot and somehow am functional.
Yeah, and disabled, right? You don't
Yes,
have
I
to talk
am.
about that,
Oh,
but
yeah, no, that's a big part of it. And I'm chronically ill, and I have an autoimmune disease called aplastic anemia that affects 2 in a million people. And I have a bunch of metal in my knee because I'm a cancer survivor, and I had a tumor chopped out and a bunch of metal put in. Mobility issues and chronic pain had become a big part of my life. And then I got another surgery to revise what wasn't working, and that really changed my life. And so, in a weird way, I'm at the other end of the spectrum now in my mobility and chronic pain, of that being a lot better. I'm more dealing with the autoimmune right now, but I've been in both places, and it definitely is hard to manage being creative with all of that and having creative energy.
yeah, because chronic illness, I have a friend that is that way. I think her surgeries might have made it go away almost. But I have a best friend that has chronic illness, so I get it. It's literally a job in itself. It's a toll on your entire body, your mental, everything. So it's impressive
Yeah.
that you do all of that, period, because you're doing 7 jobs, 8 jobs at once, something like that, maybe nine.
Yeah, I mean, I've been chronically ill since I was 19. I got diagnosed the summer after my first semester or my first year of college. And so I've really been living with low platelets for almost half of my life now, which when you look back at it, it was hard at first to have energy and do the things I needed to do with all of the suppressed immune system stuff I was going through, and the different flares and managing medication and doctor appointments and sanity and grief and PTSD. And what I really did over the years is I started to put all of that toward my art and write about it and be very vocal about it. And by the time I got diagnosed with cancer, the cancer kind of took a forefront to just my mental bandwidth. And so weirdly now, 6 years after becoming like getting a tumor, now 6 years later, the anemia is in the backseat. And it's very odd to be in that position. I feel the same way about ADHD. Is I've had ADHD my whole life. I got diagnosed as a child when I was 5. I never was on medication for it until a year ago when I turned 30, and medication has changed my life. And now it feels like that ADHD is in the backseat, and it's a very odd feeling that these big life-changing things are existing and coinciding with your life, but I'm weirdly in a place where I just don't really register them as much anymore. And I think a lot of that has to do with how I approach being creative and like how I manage my energy and the support I have from my family. And I'm very lucky to be in a situation where I have that support because I know not a lot of people do.
Well, that's great, honestly. And if you'd like to, describe a little more of chronic illness, what that means, because I know people don't understand what a flare means. I learned this
Sure.
because of my best friend, and I wanted to support her and have education in it. So just
Yeah.
describing all those words you said, because I can guarantee you most people don't know what that means.
Definitely. So, an autoimmune disease basically is a disease where your immune system does not work the way a normal person's immune system works. So, think about your immune system like a little army. And if you get some bacteria in your body or an illness, a virus, then your little army of white cells goes and fights off that infection. And for people who have compromised immune systems, it means that our army is maybe 2 soldiers instead of 200 soldiers. So it's really difficult to fight off illnesses. You catch illnesses really quickly. When the flu was going around last year, oh my God, I got it so fast. It was horrible. I was sick for a month. So illnesses tend to last longer. You feel the effects of the illnesses more. And yeah, you're just more prone to getting sick. And for me, because I have a platelet deficiency, I bruise really easily. There are certain side effects I have due to the platelets that I don't have, because a normal person's platelet count is about 150,000 platelets, and mine tend to linger around 40,000, which for me is like, hi, yay.
Oh,
But
geez.
I take medication for the anemia that it suppresses my immune system. My flares can be both caused by my platelets and by my medication. One side effect I have is I get these lovely heat triggered leg cramps in the summer. That's a side effect of my medication. So I start to feel the cramping coming on. Then that interrupts my day. Then I have to go do a bunch of stretching or massage or physical therapy or acupuncture to treat that. I also get flares of fatigue where maybe my platelet count is dropping because I was recently sick, or maybe the oxygen in my body is low because platelets carry oxygen for your body. So maybe that makes me feel more tired. So there are lots of different flares people have, and especially if you have a disease like lupus, the flares constantly change, and you're doing triage on your own body and trying to patch holes while other holes are popping in your lifeboat. And it's a really hard way to live because it interrupts your routine. It makes you feel like you can't say yes to things, which gives you, lots of FOMO of, oh, I'm going to miss this family event because I don't feel good, or, oh, I'm in a flare and I got invited to a wedding and I can't go. And it makes it really difficult to anticipate what you need because the flares don't really stay the same, and your expectations of what you need to do have to reset every time.
That makes sense. And yeah, that takes a lot of energy and time.
Yeah, and mental bandwidth. And I think when you're dealing with that bandwidth of anticipating flares on top of just the general FOMO, but then also the grief of what you've gone through, the medical trauma, the CPTSD, like all the different things that give you those really complicated emotions, then you're holding a lot. And that is when, for me at least, I feel okay, I have to put this somewhere because carrying it around with me is exhausting. And just because you put it in your art doesn't mean that impact or the weight of that lessens. It always is with you, but I do think you think about it less. And to me, that's a win. If I can live my life and be optimistic and positive and not be a sad ball of depression every day, then I'm doing something right.
I think also you're allowed to be that. At least what I've gone
Yeah,
through with my best friend, I've told her, especially when she was in her lowest point of this year, of being in flare-ups of pain, intense pain that doctors weren't helping her with and weren't believing her, because that's part of the
yeah,
fun of chronic illness, of not being
definitely.
believed.
No,
So
and if
she
you need
was,
to be depressed, that's also so valid.
yeah,
I'm just saying for me, like,
oh yeah.
I find that when I'm depressed, I feel even worse physically. And so and just naturally, I tend to see the world half glass full. But I am definitely one of those people that's like, oh, okay, if I'm feeling my emotions, I am feeling my emotions. I'm going to sit here and I'm going to cry for 2 hours straight. And I'm going to wrap myself in a blanket burrito and stick my dog on my lap. And I am not going to move until every single tear in my body is now in a box of tissues.
Well, that's a good way to do it, honestly. But I do understand positive, uplifting side of it. I know with me, at least when I get in my head, which is not the same in any sense, but I just like to come up with scenarios, and it's not because autism. The way I relate to people is by relating to the level, but it can come out as wrong sometimes. That's why I'm
Yeah.
getting things ready, but I'm not saying by any means that mine's similar or anything like that. I'm just saying that at least when I get in
Well,
my head of
yeah.
self-doubt, self strongly dislike without saying the word. So wanting to be able to keep up with everyone else since my entire life, it's felt like I've never kept up with anyone and I've always been behind. And
Yeah. And ADHD is very similar in that way too. You feel like you're out of step and everyone else is in sync. And the whole time of my childhood up until last year, my time blindness was really bad. So I was always literally like not in the present that everyone else was in. And it's a very odd sensation for me to be aware of time passing. So I can totally relate to that feeling of being out of step with the world. And I think
yeah,
chronic illness amplifies that because no one understands the mobility issues you go through, or the immune system issues, or the level of grief that you feel, or anger, or depression, or mix all three together, dealer's choice.
exactly. I like the way you
Yeah.
describe that. And that's very true and very valid. Uh,
Yeah. And you're playing an emotional roulette with yourself every day. And I think a lot of people live in that world, and it's really hard. It's really difficult.
Absolutely, yeah. And it is mentally exhausting. I know that just from my friends and even when I deal with autism and ADHD, though I feel I'm more autistic, so I say autism first before I ever say ADHD, because I have time blindness, wow, time blindness, but yeah,
Yeah.
that's me not knowing how to transition. But
That's all right.
what would you want to talk about the Food for Thought musical that you're writing next?
Yeah, I've been working on this musical for 3 years. So I actually started getting into writing through theater. That's how I became a writer. I was a theater major in college, and I took a playwriting class as a freshman, and it just changed my life. And I was like, oh, maybe I'm good at writing plays because my work got into this contest and was performed at our school. And I was living in Chicago, which is an amazing theater city. And I was like, oh, I could be a playwright. Maybe that's something I want to do. And so I really dove into it. And eventually, after school, I moved back to LA. I'm from Los Angeles. And I found a writing program through New Musicals Inc., which is the sister school to BMI, which, if you're a musical theater writer, BMI as one of the premier musical theater writing workshops in the world. And it also is a PRO, like how ASCAP is a PRO, but I'm talking about the musical theater writing workshop, not the PRO. So anyway, I was like, I think I can write musical theater. I've never really written songs before, but I'm interested in writing lyrics, so I'm going to take their workshop and see what happens. So I did that. I took their 9 months beginner workshop. The ending of that was producing a show through the Hollywood Fringe Festival, which was amazing to see our work up on stage in front of people, and went on. And so over the years, I've just been studying and studying, writing more and more musical theater, and becoming a songwriter, becoming a top liner, a lyricist, being able to own my own writing as a composer. And so I started working with a composer a few years ago who's based in New York. And I pitched him a musical about a writer or a college student kind of struggling with a chronic illness and trying to get ahead in a career promotion. And the show actually started out really differently, and we honed in on what we wanted it to be about. But what we did for this musical is we anthropomorphized the character's anxiety. So in Food for Thought, the main character, Chelsea, has POTS, which is a tachycardia syndrome for your heart. So it means that your heart can race and beat erratically and be completely out of sync with your body, and it causes you to feel really dizzy and really nauseous and faint and go through all of these different symptoms. And one of my best friends had just gotten diagnosed with POTS, and so I was like, oh, how cool to write a show with that kind of representation. about someone who, like me, is really ambitious and wants to climb the corporate ladder, but is dealing with this chronic illness and hiding it from her coworkers. And so we started writing the show a few years ago, and it's been really fun to develop over time and getting really amazing actors to read through it and sing through it and hear the songs out loud. And we actually just got shortlisted for a festival, which was amazing. So we are in the top 8% of 150 submissions, which was very cool to hear. And yes, that's affirming we're on the right track with the show. And we just recorded the first 4 tracks in New York literally today. So
Oh, wow.
I've been up early today because I had to be awake in New York time to record singers.
So
And
Eastern Standard Time. I do
yeah,
know that
Eastern
time.
Standard Time, yep. And yeah, we recorded a few tracks, and now the next step with the show is to submit it for workshop premiere, first regional premiere, first world production, and some of the big grants like the Jonathan Larson grant and the Cleveland Award, the O'Neill Musical Theater Festival, NAMPT. So there's a few musical theater opportunities coming up we're submitting that for, but it feels really good to be writing a show with this kind of chronic illness representation and to have the character be really three-dimensional and seeing how her anxiety is linked to her chronic illness and finding the humor in it and finding the joy in it and exploring the grief and what that means in a corporate office environment. So I hired a few different beta readers who actually have POTS to be part of our consultants on the libretto and the songs. And so we've been implementing their feedback too. And it's been really cool to hear them say, yeah, you nailed it. You're doing this representation accurately and with care. And I think that is really great to hear as someone who has an autoimmune disease, because you really want to make sure that your friends in the chronic illness community feel represented accurately. And I hope if we ever get a production of the show that they cast it with someone who has a chronic illness or who has POTS and they're able to actually be the lead in the show. So that would be my ideal situation for it.
That would be amazing, honestly.
Yeah,
I
and
would
people
like
can
to,
follow the show too on Instagram at Food for Thought Musical.
and I'm also following on there too. So I'll make
Aw,
sure to share it where I can, even on my own, just Instagram.
thank
I try
you.
to amplify any voices I can that are disabled. Doesn't matter which part of the disabled world they're in, because
We
voices deserve
appreciate
to be.
it.
Well, I'm just
Hopefully one
happy.
day we will have more tracks online.
We will,
Yes,
guaranteed. I know we will. Right
thank
now,
you.
actually, my company that I'm building with my partner is a every-way storytelling. So Unheard Voices is just a little version of that, except that my company, you can do everything. It's
Nice.
it's meant for the disabled community. It's meant for the queer community. It's meant for, because we're all together in this, but it feels very, at least right now, it feels very separate of, oh, we have this. Oh, we have that. Yeah, it's the same thing. Why are we doing this? It makes no sense.
Totally.
At least to me. So I don't always pay attention to that chatter anymore. I used to in the past, but currently I don't because I only want to hear the chatter of education. So if it's educational without any intention of, that's your fault. No, that's your fault. So
Yeah,
I
or
just
just
pay
being
attention.
preachy, right? Preachy
Yeah.
educational is what I'm always against. I
Yeah,
would way rather have
exactly.
a three-dimensional story than to someone telling me how to feel.
Yeah, no one should tell you how to feel, but sadly, ableism exists, so they tell you how you feel, what you're supposed to think, how you're supposed to dress, how you're supposed to be in society, which
Yeah.
that's, you can think back to I think 1900s when that standard came about. I could be wrong. I don't know. 1900s, 1800s, something like that.
It
Oh,
sounds right to me.
all right, we'll go with it. Glad it sounds right to you. And then, out of curiosity, what type of poetry do you write? Since I know you write poetry.
I write poetry very differently, actually, than I write most of my other work because poetry to me is about discovery. So I write poetry about chronic illness that kind of uses nature as metaphor and taps into the natural world I write poetry about neurodivergence. I write poetry about just ordinary everyday things as well and experiences I've had. And then I also love speculative poetry because that's a very niche thing that I didn't know existed a few years ago. And it's so cool to read a fantasy poem.
I didn't even know those existed. So it's called speculative?
Yeah, like speculative poetry. There's a really great literary magazine called Specpoverse, and they have a lot of speculative poetry published. Same with Strange Horizons, which I've been published with, and they do sci-fi poetry and fantasy poetry and magical realism poetry and horror poetry, and it's very cool to see people bringing genre into poetic language because I think poetry has a connotation where people think you have to be like very highbrow and educated to understand poetry. But the metaphor that I love when I'm teaching poetry classes is that poetry is like an archaeologist unearthing dinosaur bones. You are letting the bones reveal themselves to you over time with care and intent and making choices that reveal a little bit of a tail over here and a little bit of a claw over here. And then eventually you look at it and it's a dinosaur skeleton. And you're like, ah, yes, it was a triceratops. And so that to me, and it's such a poet answer of me to be like, ah, yes, let the poetry tell you what it wants to be. But that is how I approach poetry. And what's been cool for me as an interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary artist is that my poetry has started to inform my lyric writing, and my lyric writing has started to inform my poetry. And so each medium that you're in teaches you these different craft techniques that then you can apply to each medium. And it really just gives you a bigger toolkit for your craft, which is essential if you want to be experimental and try different things.
That's very true. Something I've always stood by, because I also write poetry, and I've also written lyrics. Actually, at the beginning of Jessi Stories on Unheard Voices, I wrote lyrics. I don't sing, but I read it like poetry, but I count it
Nice.
as lyrics. But poetry is multidimensional, so not only can it be turned into like my children's book was Who You Are series. Super Gay wasn't a poem, but Who You Are series started as a poem and turned
Hmm.
into a children's book. Poetry can turn into rap, it can turn into
Yeah.
lyrics. Poetry is so multidimensional, and apparently fiction, I've never learned that one until now, but
Yeah,
you
it can
can
be fiction
do,
too.
yeah, you can do anything with poetry. And I also, just like you, I do write. I would like to write a play someday, but I prefer to do first an animated series I'm working
Hmm.
on. I like writing everything. So with me, I
Yeah.
put writer and just started streaming too. So I'm excited about that. But
Yeah, and even screenwriting teaches you structure. Then you can
mhm.
apply that to poetry. Poetry teaches you about lyricism, which then you can apply to prose. You can take any form of writing and take a lesson from it that you can apply to then a different form of writing. And I think that's what people don't really understand about writing. And I hate it when you get boxed in it, or people are like, yes, you write words, so you write books. And I'm like, well,
No.
I don't just write books, and yeah, you can't just put me in a little box like that. But to me, words are a sandbox. And so when you're in a different medium, what you're doing is you're defining your sandbox. And then you can go, okay, what do I have to play with? I have a shovel, I have a little castle mold, bucket, I have this really granular sand or wet sand, and defining that sandbox is what's really helpful no matter what medium you're in, but then being willing to go, oh, wait, I have a stick from this other sandbox over here that I'm going to cross and bring it over to mine, or these marbles or whatever. And then suddenly your sandbox is full of marbles. And so being willing to try different things and experiment, I think teaches you more about writing than just staying in a limited box that someone places you in.
Plus, it's boring. I've said no to
Yeah.
writing books my whole life. That, yes, I have books, I've published books, I have been in traditional publishing, but it does not make me, it does make me an author, but it doesn't make me a, just like you said, in that box. I don't
I
do well
mean,
in boxes anyway.
can you tell we have ADHD?
Yes.
And this
Yes,
is
you
the
can.
problem with ADHD, right? Is that you get
Correct.
drawn in so many directions. But for me, at least, embracing that in my career has made such a difference because it's when you go to improv classes, it's that yes and rule. And being able to yes and through your creativity just opens doors and windows and chimneys and
Cabinets,
basements and cabinets.
because
It
that was
opens all
left
the
out.
doors. Yeah.
Cabinet.
Yeah, it opens every door. And I think being willing to yes and in your life is just really important. And then managing your bandwidth becomes a big part of, okay, how can I say yes and to this while also preventing myself from being in my bed for 6 days? So
Yeah.
it's a hard wire to walk, but it is really fun.
Yeah, I agree fully with that. At least with me and autistic burnout, because that tends to leave me at least in bed for 2 days. I've learned how to, not fully, that's a lie. I'm still learning how to balance the autistic burnout of if I do socialize too much, I'm actually gaining more traction the more socializing I get involved because my ADHD side does honestly love the socializing as my autistic side goes, no, why?
Yeah,
But I'm learning how to balance, like giving myself maybe an hour break or 2 hour break. Like today in between streaming, I gave myself an hour to just lay down in bed and attempt to do nothing. And then I ended up doing a little something within that time period. That always happens as of lately. But I'm
yeah,
rewiring myself to try to get some relaxation in, even if it's just a little tiny bit. I'm trying to work that back in
yes,
because mental health is so important, especially for the disabled community, period, because our bandwidth isn't that big in the first place, at
yeah.
least of my personal experience of it's just not that big. It's not as big as we're supposed to have it.
Yeah, and that's why for me, I try really hard to balance my day job with my writing and my life because, yeah, that burnout comes for us all. And for me, being able to actually have a whole hour to have lunch and stand in the sun for 10 minutes and throw my dog's ball for her and maybe go on a little walk or just have some TV time or some bed rotting time, that is so essential to getting through my day for me. So I've been prioritizing that more lately of I must have my hour break in the afternoon. I must have a 30-minute break at the end of the afternoon to transition to nighttime and get off of my computer. And yeah, the value of that has been really helpful. But it's hard to stick to your guns when you want to say yes to everything. And that dopamine spike goes in your brain, and you're like, ah, yeah, someone wants to go meet me for coffee later. And what I've been having to do lately is actually scheduling people 2 weeks out from my current schedule because otherwise I overwhelm myself and then the day is booked and then it's gone. And so I'm trying a lot harder to be more mindful of my own energy and bandwidth, especially since my day job is now working in publishing. My creative burnout is at an all-time high since my day job is working with words, and then I get off of my computer and then I write. So it's been a challenge.
Yes, that is definitely a challenge. Yeah, and with me, at least for my day job, it's working with kids and adults with disabilities, so it's a lot of physical work and a lot of mental creativity. I do have some creativity in the day, which I appreciate, of having to figure out, oh, how can we protect this possible accident or event from happening if someone gets too overstimulated? How can we do this? Because they go out in public and get overstimulated. It's a fact. It's going to happen. There's no preventing it. It's part of the place that I work at because it's about inclusion and teaching the public about inclusion. Because honestly, the public's not very well educated in it. That's part of the reason why I wanted to start this podcast is to educate people
Yeah.
and for them to hear the voices that you literally don't really hear from. Yes, you have film and everything that's out there, but it's not as popular as trying to think of a film that's really popular or something right now. Horror
Um,
film Obsession is popular, but I think that's
sure.
indie,
It is indie, yeah.
so that doesn't count. But I'm trying to
Voicemails for Isabel is on Netflix and it actually has really great representation. So
it
I've been very
does.
happy
I
lately.
did like that. I did watch it. I
I
really
I
liked
also watched it and I cried 5 times.
it was
I
so
wasn't
good
expecting to
though.
cry.
The sync between them. Oh my gosh, it reminds me of my partner and I, the synchronicities and parallels, and I really liked it a lot, honestly. And
Yeah, and for me it hit so close to home of not because I have siblings and I grew up with a lot of siblings in my life. And then to understand what it's like to be the person in the bed going through this extended medical treatment and to also be a sibling and to be a sister and to be watching someone else live the life that you wish that you had. Oh my God, it was a gut punch. It was just such a gut punch, but beautifully done. And they did a great job of capturing what that experience is like for both that character of Izzy and for the main character Jill. So if you haven't seen that movie, I would say go see that movie and bring
Well, and
tissues.
even I don't remember the male character's name because he's dealing with PTSD and a couple other things. I think a lot of people don't consider what the characters are going through. I have a lot of people that I follow that are part of educating on abuse. I can see the abuse side of things, at least from the male perspective. But to me, he was going through PTSD and his own issues, and they kind of met in the middle in an area where they needed to at a time they needed to. So to me, it wasn't a toxic relationship. It would have been toxic if he would have never told the truth and they would
Yeah,
have gotten married, but the truth did eventually come out.
yeah.
And they were honest with each other, and he was very respectful of her sisters. I'm not going to give any spoilers away, but the sister, and respectful of the boundaries she has, even with her sister and everything that happened to her, which I'm not saying, I'm trying to prevent any spoilers, but it's a really good film. I think they did a really good job. And again, I can see the perspective of the people I follow, the abuse side of things, but I don't see it that
Yeah,
way. I see it as a beautiful love story of synchronicities, parallels. Like I said, it reminds me a lot of my partner and I of having faith and having hope because they had to have
yeah.
faith and hope in that film. There was a
Oh,
time period
definitely.
where they had to believe that it would happen when they weren't in any communication whatsoever. It's
Yeah. No, and for me, like I've gone through so much work on myself with having PTSD, and it's definitely not as simple as people think it is to just roll over in your bed or your life and just go, oh, I'm all magically cured now. It's like PTSD doesn't work that way. And I had really bad pain triggered PTSD after my knee surgery, where literally if I like stubbed my toe, I would go into a panic attack. And it was just because I had the most painful surgery I've ever had when I got my tumor removed in my femur. And if anyone who's listening has ever had bone surgery, ooh, I see you because it really sucked. And it definitely, I equate recovering from that surgery to being tortured for 2.5, 3 weeks of like the pain levels actually becoming manageable, learning how to walk again, learning how to use the new metal in my leg for balance and stability. And it gave me such bad PTSD that I was getting panic attacks from just stubbing my toe, bumping into counters. And if you have ADHD, that is every single day of my life. I'm covered in bruises from constantly bumping into things. And so it got to the point where I went, I can't be having these panic attacks anymore. They are completely disrupting my life. They're completely disrupting my body and sending me into flares. And it just doesn't feel good to have a panic attack. And so I did a lot of therapy and a lot of EMDR and T therapy, and that really helped. And now I'm at the point where I can recognize a panic attack when it's coming. I know how to stop a panic attack. I know what things to do to get out of a panic attack. And it's definitely a lot more complicated than people think. And I wish that more people had access to those kinds of tools because a panic attack is a protective mechanism, right? It's part of your anxiety in your body telling you like I'm going to protect you from this thing. This thing is not normal. But I think for chronic illness and for anything disabling that people have been through, we're taught a lot how to manage the physical side of our illnesses. We're not taught to manage the mental side and the mental health effects of going through treatment, of going through getting diagnosed, of going through not getting diagnosed and having doctors not believe you or not taking you seriously or referring you to another doctor yet again. If you're struggling with panic attacks or anxiety, if you can go get a therapist and get some help, that is my advice.
for me, at least with my PTSD, and I used to have panic attacks when I was really little, but didn't know how to do anything with that. I had to learn on my own, literally everything. I learned breathing techniques. That's mainly what's helped me, at least with that. But with my PTSD, it looks like I'm having a blank stare staring into nowhere. But I'm really going back in time to whatever that moment is that was traumatizing. I'm similar to how my grandpa, when he goes back into Vietnam, he would stare mindlessly too. So I can be standing
Oh,
doing
wow.
something and I'll just be staring and I'll be like a dead human standing. I'm fully
Mm-hmm.
aware when it's happening, but it's scary for me. I've only had the out of body experience once. Sometimes I have
Mm-hmm.
full throttle out of body experiences of PTSD and CPTSD. I know it's complex. It's definitely
Yeah.
not just PTSD, but I have to bring my mind back, which I taught myself this of how to go, are you actually looking at yourself right now in the situation? And how can you bring yourself back? Because it's weird seeing yourself stand there.
Yeah.
And then as you go back to that situation, most of the time it's from either my cult days or just stuff as a child. And I
Yeah.
have to work through it therapeutically, but just logically of how can I get myself back? Like when
Mm-hmm.
it first started happening to me, I didn't know how to get back into my body and be aware of myself again. But now I
Yeah.
know how to, but it's a gradual don't panic is the first step. At least I do with myself, don't panic. And then I ask myself questions and I have to answer each one every step of the way to get back. If I don't answer it every step of the way, I'm going to get stuck somewhere and not make it back into feeling everything. People can literally be talking to me in that moment and I won't hear a word they're saying.
Oh.
Sometimes my PTSD, I don't hear anything. So I do always do a double check with people. It's also when I get overwhelmed with autism, funny enough, they both play the same role of no longer hearing. So I do double checks of, did I hear you correctly? Oh,
Yes,
thank goodness.
I know what you mean. The auditory processing is not my strength.
Ooh.
Weirdly, my dad is an audiologist and he's never checked really my auditory processing, so I gotta get him to do that. It's definitely that's a problem I have with ADHD is being able to actually hear what someone just said. But yeah, it's super important to talk about all of this stuff. And for me, putting it in poetry has been so helpful with healing and recovering and processing everything I've been through. And so last year, I published my first chapbook, which is, for those who don't know, a small book of poetry that isn't a full book. A full book would maybe be like 75 to 100 poems. A chapbook can be anywhere from 5 poems all the way to 20, 30 poems at max. And so mine falls around the 20-ish range, I think, and it's called Through My Marrow, and it's a chapbook published by Bottle Cap Press, which is a great indie poetry press here in Los Angeles. And I know they take submissions, so if you're a poet, feel free to submit to them. They're great. And they publish a lot of poetry on chronic illness and disability, and I've made friends with their other poets who have also published chapbooks about the same thing. So it's very cool to be in that community.
That's awesome. I love that very much. It's good to learn about Los Angeles stuff too.
Yeah,
I
you
love
wouldn't
Los
know. There's a
Angeles.
whole indie poetry community out here.
I didn't know that. That's pretty awesome and cool.
Yeah, same thing with music. It's like people think LA, they think acting, but the music community out here is so strong, as it should be, considering people are writing music for TV and film all the time. But there's also a little weird indie folk subset, like that I got introduced to last year because I started writing folk music and found this whole underground folk scene. So LA is just such a big city in general. People don't really understand how actually ginormous it is. It takes me an hour to drive from one side of the valley to the other if there's traffic. Think about that being like 3 New Yorks or 2 New Yorks instead of just taking the train from the north side all the way down to the south side of New York or east to west, depending on what direction you're going from.
Yeah, that makes sense, honestly. I drive an hour to work, but that's because I live in the middle of nowhere where I live, but
Hmm.
I'll eventually be moving.
That's great.
Will be announced after my partner and I do our announcement here on my podcast. I'll keep on advertising that
Great.
in November. It's because we plan to come out, I guess, a coming out of a coming out. I don't know how to put it.
Okay.
But yeah, anyways, moving to currently anything you want to advertise, like works you're currently on, teaching, dates,
Yes.
anything of those.
Yeah, so well, the first cool thing that I'm doing is I'm teaching a experimental fiction workshop through Black Fox Literary Magazine. It is going to be July 23rd, which is a Thursday, and 3 o'clock p.m. East Coast time, or no, 3 o'clock PST, 6:30 East Coast. And it's an hour and a half, and it's going to be a lecture and then writing and talking about what you wrote. And there will be time for questions, and we're going to be talking about all these experimental techniques in writing fiction, like having an unreliable narrator or nonlinear structure, or using epistolary documents, or even poetry or lyrics in your books. So that's going to be really fun, and we'll generate some short story or flash fiction. And then I'm also teaching through Pocket MFA a few days later. I think you do have to be enrolled in their program to take that class. But then I will be teaching through Writers Atelier in October. And so if you follow me on Instagram, I'll be posting about that. And I'm pretty sure that's open to the public.
Sweet. I love that. That's perfect. And
And
then
I
where
will
can...
also, oh, sorry.
Go ahead. Say what you're going to say.
No, I will also be releasing the next track on my EP in August. So keep an eye out for The Pacific Northwest, which is the next song on my EP, Songs for My Therapist, which is a musical theater comedy album.
I really love that. That's awesome. And I love comedy. But
Thank
also
you.
let people know where they can find you on social media so they can follow you and
Yeah,
see everything you're doing.
I'm all over. So I'm at Makena Metz. That is Makena, Makena, phonetically spelled, not the Irish way. And I'm at Makena Metz on Threads, Instagram, Facebook, what else? TikTok. And you can go to my website, makenametz.com. I try to post pretty consistently on social media, but feel free to shoot me an email. You can contact me via my website, and I'm happy to talk about your teaching, editing, or writing needs anytime.
Yay. Okay, thank you so much for coming on, and
Yeah, it
thank
was
you
so nice
for
chatting
going
with
on.
you.
I like our rants we had. That was great. Hopefully
That
we
was
keep
great.
on staying in contact too.
Yes, definitely. I'm happy to rant anytime.
Yay! Rants together. That's so exciting. Okay, let's see if I can figure out how to stop this. Here we go. Thanks so much for being here, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this episode with many more to come. If you'd like to help support and grow the podcast and even the YouTube channel, please not only follow, subscribe, but please leave a review on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere you listen to this podcast. Thanks so much for being here. Until next week, on Wednesday at 7 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. Peace. Catch you later.